The dust-laden wind whispered across the plains as Eleanor Zimmer clutched her worn leather satchel against her chest, stepping off the stagecoach into Georgetown, Colorado, with nothing but fear and determination in her eyes. The year was 1876, and the mining boom had transformed this once quiet mountain town into a bustling hub of prospectors, merchants, and those seeking a new beginning just like her. Eleanor kept her head down, the purple-black bruise encircling her left eye impossible to hide despite her attempts with a tilted bonnet. The journey from Philadelphia had been long and arduous, every mile putting distance between her and the nightmare she'd fled. Her husband's family name carried weight in the East power that had kept her trapped until that final, terrible night when she realized she would die if she stayed. With the little money she'd secretly saved and the wedding ring she'd pawned at the first opportunity, Eleanor had purchased passage west, following rumors of a cousin who had settled in Georgetown years before. "Watch your step, madam," the driver called out, tossing down her small trunk without ceremony. It landed with a thud in the dusty street, sending a small cloud of dirt into the air. Eleanor nodded her thanks, careful to keep her face partially concealed. The sun was setting, painting the surrounding mountains with hues of orange and purple, but the main street remained alive with activity. Men in dusty work clothes moved in and out of saloons, while merchants closed up shops for the evening. A group of miners fresh from the silver mines trudged past, their faces darkened with grime and exhaustion. She clutched the piece of paper with her cousin's last known address, squinting at the faded ink. 5 years had passed since they'd exchanged letters. Eleanor prayed Emily still lived where she'd written from. "Excuse me," she said softly to a passing woman. "Could you direct me to Pine Street?" The woman glanced at Eleanor, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the bruise. "3 blocks that way, dear," she replied, pointing down the street, "but you might not want to head there alone this time of evening." Eleanor thanked her and started walking, feeling eyes following her as she moved. Her black traveling dress was fine but wrinkled from the journey, her boots caked with dust. She knew she looked exactly like what she was, a woman running from something. As she turned onto Pine Street, the buildings grew more sparse, the street darker without the glow of shop windows. Eleanor's heart sank as she approached the address on her paper. The small cabin stood dark and clearly abandoned, its door hanging askew on broken hinges. "Emily Clark don't live there no more," called a voice from the neighboring house. An elderly man stood on his porch, pipe in hand. "Moved on to Denver about 2 years back when her husband struck it rich with a claim." Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. Her one lifeline gone, she had enough money for perhaps 2 nights at a hotel, nothing more. "Thank you," she managed, turning away to hide the tears that threatened to spill. She made it only a few steps before a group of 3 rough-looking men rounded the corner, their loud laughter carrying down the quiet street. "Well, look what we have here," one called out, spotting Eleanor. "You lost, pretty lady." Eleanor quickened her pace, clutching her satchel tighter. The men followed, their boots heavy on the packed dirt road. "I asked you a question," the lead man said, his voice harder now as he cut in front of her, blocking her path. "Don't be rude now." Eleanor kept her face down, heart hammering in her chest. "Please, I need to get back to town." The man reached out and roughly tilted her face up to the fading light. "Someone already got to you, huh?" he laughed, pointing at her blackened eye. "Guess you don't learn easy." His companion moved behind her, cutting off any escape. Maybe she needs another lesson. Eleanor's mind flashed to the night she'd fled her husband's rage, his fists, the sound of her own screams. Never again, she had promised herself, she would die fighting first. "Step away from the lady," came a deep voice from the shadows. The men turned, and Eleanor saw a tall figure approaching from the direction of town. He moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, and as he came into view, she could make out the silhouette of a wide-brimmed hat and the glint of a star pinned to his vest. "Mind your business, Foster," spat the man, still gripping Eleanor's arm. "Miss being harassed is my business," the newcomer replied evenly, stopping a few paces away. "Sheriff Foster McAllister, and you boys are creating a disturbance." The sheriff's hand rested casually near his holster, but there was nothing casual about his stance or the steel in his voice. The men seemed to recognize the threat, their bravado faltering. "We was just having a friendly conversation," muttered the leader, releasing Eleanor's arm. "Conversation's over," Sheriff McAllister said. "Move along." The men backed away, muttering curses but unwilling to challenge the lawman. Eleanor watched them retreat into the darkness, her heart still pounding wildly. "Thank you," she whispered, finally looking up at her rescuer. In the dying light, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of years under the sun. His eyes narrowed slightly as they took in her injured face. "You arrived with a black eye," he stated simply, no judgment in his tone. Then, with quiet certainty that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine, he added, "No one will touch you again." For the first time since fleeing Philadelphia, Eleanor felt something other than fear, a tentative, fragile sense of safety. Sheriff McAllister gestured toward town. "Let me escort you to wherever you're staying." Eleanor hesitated, then admitted the truth. "I have nowhere to go. My cousin no longer lives at the address I have." The sheriff considered this, then nodded decisively. "The boarding house run by Widow Jenkins has a spare room. It's respectable and affordable." He picked up her trunk with ease. "I'll walk you there." As they made their way back to the main street, Eleanor felt the curious stares of townspeople. She realized what a sight they must make the sheriff escorting a battered woman through town at dusk. "I don't want to cause trouble," she murmured. "You're not," he replied simply. "Georgetown's growing fast. Newcomers arrive daily." "Not all with black eyes," she said wryly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "No, not all." He paused before adding, "Whatever brought you here, you're entitled to a fresh start. That's what the West is for." The Widow Jenkins boarding house was a tidy 2-story structure on a side street near the center of town. The older woman who answered the door took one look at Eleanor's face and ushered her in without questions, shooting the sheriff a knowing glance. "Room at the back, 2nd floor." "Most private," she said briskly. $2 a week includes breakfast and supper." Eleanor calculated quickly. Even at that reasonable price, her funds would last barely a month. "I'll need to find work immediately," she said. "We can discuss that in the morning, Mrs. Jenkins replied, taking her satchel. "For now, you need rest and a hot meal." Sheriff McAllister set down her trunk in the entryway. "I'll check in tomorrow," he said to Eleanor. "See how you're settling." After he left, Mrs. Jenkins showed Eleanor to a small but clean room with a narrow bed and a window overlooking a small garden. "Supper's in 20 minutes, the widow said. "There's a wash basin if you'd like to freshen up." Left alone, Eleanor sank onto the bed, the events of the past weeks catching up to her. She had traveled over 1,000 miles, fleeing the man who had vowed to love and cherish her, only to end up in a strange town with no connections and dwindling funds. Yet for the first time since her marriage had descended into violence, she felt a flicker of hope. The sheriff's words echoed in her mind, "No one will touch you again." A promise from a stranger that somehow carried more weight than her husband's wedding vows ever had. Morning came with the sounds of a town awakening, wagons rolling by, shopkeepers calling to one another, the distant clang of metal from the blacksmiths. Eleanor dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a navy blue cotton with modest lace at the collar, and pinned her chestnut hair into a simple bun. The bruise around her eye had deepened to a vivid purple, impossible to disguise. Mrs. Jenkins served a hearty breakfast of eggs, biscuits, and coffee to her boarders, 3 minors, an elderly schoolteacher, and now Eleanor. The conversation was mercifully general, though Eleanor caught curious glances at her injury. "I need work," Eleanor told Mrs. Jenkins as they cleared the breakfast dishes. "I have experience as a seamstress and in keeping accounts." Mrs. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. "Merkel's dry goods might need help. Old Mr. Merkel's eyesight is failing and his ledgers are a mess from what I hear." With directions to the store, Eleanor set out, determined to secure employment before her funds were completely depleted. The morning light revealed Georgetown to be a picturesque town nestled among towering mountains. Despite its remote location, the streets were lined with substantial buildings, evidence of the prosperity brought by the silver mines. Merkel's Dry Goods occupied a corner building with large display windows. Inside, Eleanor found a cluttered but well-stocked establishment overseen by a white-haired man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Mr. Merkel," she inquired. "I'm Eleanor Zimmer. Mrs. Jenkins suggested I inquire about possible employment." The old man peered at her, his gaze lingering momentarily on her bruised face before politely shifting away. "Employment? Well now, I hadn't thought to hire anyone, but—" He gestured to the cluttered counter where ledgers lay open. "My eyes aren't what they used to be." "You have experience with bookkeeping, young lady?" "Yes, sir. I kept all the household accounts for my—" Eleanor hesitated, unsure how to refer to the man she'd fled. "For my previous household. I'm also skilled with a needle." Mr. Merkel asked her a few questions about double-entry bookkeeping, seemingly satisfied with her answers. "I can offer $3 a week to start," he said finally. 9 to 6 half-day on Saturday. It wasn't much, but combined with her savings, it would keep her afloat. "Thank you, Mr. Merkel, I accept. You can start tomorrow," he said. "And Miss Zimmer, that eye of yours, Georgetown's generally peaceful, but if you're having trouble—" "No trouble," Eleanor assured him quickly. "It's from before I arrived." Mr. Merkel nodded, asking no further questions, for which Eleanor was grateful. As she left the shop, a familiar figure approached from across the street. Sheriff McAllister tipped his hat in greeting. "Miss Zimmer," he said, "I trust you had a comfortable night." "Yes, thank you, Sheriff. And I've just secured employment at Merkel's." Something like approval flashed in his eyes. "Good, old Merkel's fair, he'll treat you right." He hesitated, then added, "I've been making inquiries about your cousin." "Emily Clark, was it?" Eleanor nodded, surprised by his initiative. "She's indeed in Denver with her husband. Runs a millinery shop there, from what I gather." "Thank you for checking," Eleanor said, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Though I don't plan to impose on her, I intend to make my own way here." Foster McAllister studied her for a moment. "Most women arriving alone are looking to join family or a husband." "I'm not most women, Sheriff." A smile tugged at his lips. "I'm beginning to see that, Miss Zimmer." Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor settled into a routine. She rose early, took breakfast with the other boarders, then walked to Merkel's, where she spent her days organizing the chaotic bookkeeping system and occasionally helping customers. The work was mundane but satisfying, allowing her mind to focus on ledgers rather than memories. Her eye healed gradually, the bruise fading from purple to yellow-green. As it did, she found the townsfolk more willing to engage with her, no longer averting their eyes in discomfort. Mrs. Jenkins introduced her to the other shopkeepers and to the wives of prominent citizens who frequented the boarding house parlor for afternoon tea. And almost daily, Sheriff McAllister found reasons to pass by Merkel's or cross paths with her on her way home. Their conversations were brief but increasingly comfortable, moving beyond mere courtesy to genuine interest. "How'd you come to be sheriff so young?" she asked one evening as he walked her back to the boarding house after she'd worked late. "My father was sheriff before me," Foster explained. "He taught me everything: tracking, shooting, reading people. When his heart gave out 3 years ago, the town council asked me to step in. You must have proven yourself capable." "There were doubters," he admitted. "I was only 27, but Georgetown was growing fast with the silver boom. Needed someone who knew the territory." Eleanor sensed there was more to the story. The respect the townspeople showed him suggested he'd earned his position through more than just inheritance. "And you?" Foster asked. "What brings a Philadelphia lady to a mining town?" Eleanor tensed. She'd been vague about her past, mentioning only that she'd come from Philadelphia to join her cousin. "You recognized my accent," she said, deflecting slightly. "That and the quality of your dress, even travel-worn, it's Eastern-made, fine stitching." Eleanor hadn't realized he'd been paying such close attention. "Yes, I'm from Philadelphia. As for why I left," she took a deep breath. "I was married there. It wasn't a good situation." Foster nodded, asking no more, but his jaw tightened. They walked in silence for a few moments before he spoke again. "My mother endured something similar," he said quietly. "My father wasn't always the respected sheriff. Before I was born, he had a terrible temper, nearly killed her once." Eleanor glanced at him, surprised by this confidence. "What changed?" She left him, Foster said simply. Packed me up, I was just a baby and fled to her brother's ranch in Wyoming. My father tracked us down 6 months later, but by then he'd realized what he'd become. Begged her forgiveness. She made him work for it, 2 years living separately while he proved he could change. And he did, became a different man, never raised his voice to her again, let alone his hand. That's how I knew I wanted to uphold the law, watching him transform from someone who broke it to someone who defended it. They reached the boarding house steps, and Eleanor turned to face him. Thank you for sharing that, she said softly. What I'm saying, Miss Zimmer, is that I understand why you might have run, and you don't need to explain anything to me or anyone else in this town. His consideration moved her deeply. Thank you, Sheriff. Foster, he corrected gently. When I'm not wearing this star, I'm just Foster. Their relationship evolved gradually from cautious friendship to something more. Foster began inviting Eleanor on afternoon walks on his days off, showing her the beauty of the mountain town. They picnicked by the creek that ran along the edge of town, and he taught her to skip stones across its surface, laughing at her initial clumsy attempts. Eleanor flourished in Georgetown. Mr. Merkel, impressed with her efficiency, raised her salary after just a month. She moved from the boarding house to a small rented cabin closer to the store, furnishing it modestly with second-hand items that she lovingly restored. For the first time in years, she created a space that was truly her own. On a warm Sunday in June, nearly 2 months after her arrival, Foster invited her to accompany him to his family's cabin a few miles outside town. It's where I grew up, he explained. I still keep it, though I stay in town most nights to be near the jail. The cabin sat in a meadow surrounded by aspen trees, their leaves shimmering like coins in the breeze. It was simple but well built, with a wide porch and carefully tended flower beds that surprised Eleanor. My mother's legacy, Foster said, noticing her admiration of the colorful blooms. I try to keep them going. Inside, the cabin was unexpectedly cozy. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that Eleanor itched to explore. A quilt in vibrant blues and greens draped across a rocking chair. The furnishings were masculine but thoughtfully arranged. It's lovely, Eleanor said sincerely. I wouldn't have expected a bachelor sheriff to maintain such a home. I wasn't raised to live like a savage, he replied with a smile. Besides, it helps me remember them, my parents. As the day progressed, they prepared a simple meal together, Foster proving himself surprisingly competent in the kitchen. The ease between them was new for Eleanor, who had grown accustomed to tension and fear in her married life. After the meal, they sat on the porch watching the sun begin its descent behind the mountains. Foster seemed uncharacteristically pensive. I've been meaning to ask you something, he said finally. There's a social at the church next Saturday. Would you consider accompanying me? The invitation surprised Eleanor. Though their friendship was no secret in town, they had maintained a certain public distance. She left the question hanging. As my guest, he said, though I'd be honored if you considered it a courtship. Eleanor looked away, conflicting emotions churning within her. Foster, I'm still legally married. He was silent for a long moment. I suspected as much. You never referred to yourself as a widow. I left without legal dissolution. In the eyes of the law and the church, I'm still bound to him. She hesitated, then decided Foster deserved the whole truth. His name is Robert Winters. His family owns half the textile mills in Philadelphia. When I married him 5 years ago, I thought it was a love match. He was charming, attentive. Then his father died, leaving him the business and Robert. Changed. Foster listened silently as Eleanor continued, finally unburdening herself of the story she'd kept locked inside. The first time he hit me, he wept afterward, promised it would never happen again. I believed him. The second time, he blamed business pressures. The third time, he blamed me. It became a pattern: violence followed by reconciliation, then more violence. His family's position protected him from any consequences. Her hands trembled slightly as she recalled those dark days. The night I left, he'd been drinking heavily. He accused me of flirting with his business partner. The beating was worse than before. I thought I would die there on our bedroom floor. When he finally passed out, I took what money I had secretly saved, packed a small bag, and fled. Foster reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. "You did what you had to do to survive. But I'm still his wife," Eleanor said, the word bitter on her tongue. "If he finds me, he has legal right to me to any property I acquire. In the eyes of the law, I'm still his possession." Foster's expression hardened. "Not here, not in my town." "The law, I know the law," he interrupted gently. "I also know justice. They're not always the same." He turned to face her fully, his eyes earnest. "Eleanor, I understand if you're not ready, if you never want to consider another relationship. But know this, I care for you, not as something to possess or control, but as a woman of strength and dignity who deserves happiness." Eleanor felt tears threaten. No one had spoken to her with such respect in years. "I care for you too," she admitted. "More than I thought possible after everything, but I'm afraid not just of Robert finding me, but of trusting again." "Then we'll take it slowly," Foster said, "one day at a time. Starting with a church social, if you're willing." Eleanor found herself nodding. "Yes, I'd like that." The church social marked a turning point. Dancing with Foster under lantern light in the churchyard, Eleanor felt something long dormant within her stir back to life: joy, possibility, hope. The townsfolk watched with approving smiles as their sheriff guided her through a Virginia reel, his usual reserve softening into genuine happiness. By autumn, their courtship was the subject of gentle gossip throughout Georgetown. Eleanor had become a fixture at Merkel's, now managing most of the business as the old man's health declined. She'd made friends, real friends who valued her for herself, not her family connections or social standing. Foster called on her regularly, always respectful of her boundaries. They shared books, ideas, dreams. For her birthday in October, he gifted her a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a mountain range. "To remember where you found freedom," he'd said. Their first kiss came on a crisp November evening as he walked her home from a town meeting. Snow had begun to dust the streets, and Eleanor had shivered despite her wool cloak. Foster had wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close for warmth. "May I?" he'd asked, his breath visible in the cold air. Eleanor's answer was to rise on tiptoe, pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was everything her husband's had never been: tender, respectful, asking rather than demanding. When they parted, Foster touched her cheek with reverent fingers. "I love you, Eleanor Zimmer," he said simply. "Whatever comes, know that." "I love you too," she whispered back, the words both terrifying and freeing. As winter settled over Georgetown, Eleanor felt herself truly heal, not just from the physical wounds that had marked her arrival, but from the deeper injuries to her spirit. Foster's steady presence and the community's acceptance had shown her a different kind of life, one where she was valued and safe. Then, in early December, a telegram arrived that shattered her newfound peace. Mr. Merkel handed it to her with a concerned expression. "Special delivery from Denver," he said. Messenger rode through the snow to deliver it. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened it, somehow knowing before she read the words what they would say. "Found you, stop arriving Georgetown December 10, stop you are my wife, stop Robert." The paper fluttered from her fingers to the counter. December 10, just 3 days away. Bad news. Mr. Merkel asked gently. "My husband," Eleanor managed. "He's coming." Mr. Merkel's eyebrows rose. "Husband, I thought you were." He stopped, seemingly recalculating his understanding of her situation. "You'd best tell the sheriff," he said finally. Eleanor nodded numbly, already imagining Robert's arrival, his smooth explanations to the townspeople about his troubled wife, his charming apologies for any misunderstandings, the way he would assert his legal rights to her person and property. She found Foster at the jail, reviewing wanted posters. His smile at her arrival quickly faded as she wordlessly handed him the telegram. "He found me," she said unnecessarily. Foster read the message, his expression darkening. How did he trace you here?" "I wrote to my cousin in Denver," Eleanor admitted. "Perhaps the letter was intercepted, or perhaps she unwittingly revealed my location." Foster paced the small office, thinking rapidly. "We have 3 days. You could run again. I have money saved. I could help you get to California or even north to Canada." The offer touched her deeply, but Eleanor shook her head. "No, I'm tired of running. Georgetown is my home now. You're here, I won't be chased away." "But legally," I know what the law says, Eleanor interrupted. I also know what you said that law and justice aren't always the same. Foster stopped pacing, studying her with newfound respect. You want to stand your ground. I do. The certainty in her voice surprised even her. I've built a life here. I have friends, work I enjoy, a home of my own, and I have you. She stepped closer to him. I won't give that up without a fight. A slow smile spread across Foster's face. Then we'll fight together. Over the next 2 days, they prepared. Foster consulted with Judge Hammond, the circuit judge who happened to be in town, about the legalities of their situation. Eleanor confided in Mrs. Jenkins and a few other trusted friends, revealing the full truth of her marriage and escape. The support she received overwhelmed her. Mrs. Jenkins insisted on being present when Robert arrived. Mr. Merkel declared that Eleanor's position at the store was secure, regardless of her husband's claims. Even Dr. Peterson offered to document her previous injuries, though they had long since healed. These people hardly know me, Eleanor marveled to Foster the night before Robert's expected arrival. They sat in her small cabin, the fire crackling against the December chill. They know enough, Foster replied. They've seen your character, your kindness, your work ethic. In Georgetown, that counts for more than Eastern money or legal technicalities. Eleanor reached for his hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that you've given me something precious, the courage to stand up for myself. Foster brought her hand to his lips. You always had that courage, Eleanor. I just helped you remember it. December 10th dawned clear and cold, the sun glinting off snow-covered mountains. Eleanor dressed with care in a deep green dress that Foster had once admired, pinning her hair in a simple but elegant style. She would face Robert not as the frightened woman who had fled, but as the confident, respected person she had become. The Denver stage was due at noon. By 11, Foster was at her cabin, dressed in his best suit with his sheriff's badge prominently displayed. Ready, he asked, offering his arm. As I'll ever be, she replied, taking it. They walked to the stage depot together, aware of curious glances from townspeople who had heard rumors of the impending confrontation. Mrs. Jenkins joined them, along with Mr. Merkel and Judge Hammond. The show of support strengthened Eleanor's resolve. At precisely 12 o'clock, the stagecoach rolled into town, its wheels crunching through the packed snow. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest as the door swung open and passengers began to disembark. Robert Winters stepped down last tall, handsome, and impeccably dressed in a tailored wool coat. His eyes scanned the crowd, fixing on Eleanor with an intensity that once would have made her cower. Eleanor, he called, striding toward her with confident steps. Thank God I've found you. I've been worried sick. He reached for her hands, but Eleanor stepped back, maintaining her position beside Foster. Robert, she acknowledged coolly, this is Sheriff McAllister. Robert's gaze flickered to Foster, taking in the badge and the protective stance. His smile never faltered, but something cold entered his eyes. Sheriff, I appreciate your looking after my wife during this difficult time. Eleanor has been unwell, prone to flights of fancy and hysteria. Our doctor in Philadelphia recommended rest, but she fled before treatment could begin. Is that what you call it? Eleanor said, finding her voice stronger than expected. Treatment, like the treatment that left me unconscious on our bedroom floor. Robert's expression tightened momentarily before smoothing into concerned solicitude. You see what I mean, these delusions of abuse. Eleanor, darling, you fell down the stairs, you know that. I know what you did to me, Eleanor replied evenly. So does Sheriff McAllister, so do many people in this town. Robert's mask slipped slightly, irritation showing through. This is a private family matter. I'll be taking my wife home today. No, you won't, Foster said, speaking for the first time. His voice was calm but carried unmistakable authority. I beg your pardon, Robert's tone sharpened. She is legally my wife. That may be, Judge Hammond interjected, stepping forward. But this young woman has established residency in Georgetown. She has employment, property, and standing in the community. Any claim you wish to make must be properly adjudicated. Robert's confidence wavered slightly. I have rights. You have the right to file a petition with the court, the judge continued smoothly, which I will hear in due course. In the meantime, Mrs. Winters or Miss Zimmer, as she is known here, remains free to continue her life as she has established it. "This is outrageous," Robert sputtered. "I've traveled over 1,000 miles, and you can stay at the hotel while your petition is considered," Foster suggested. "Or return to Philadelphia and correspond through legal channels. Your choice." Eleanor watched the familiar rage build in Robert's eyes, the tightening of his jaw, the flush creeping up his neck. For the first time, she viewed these signs not with fear, but with analytical detachment. "A word in private with my wife," Robert insisted through clenched teeth. "No," Eleanor said firmly. "Anything you have to say can be said here." Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You embarrass me publicly, and I promise you'll regret it when we're alone." Foster moved subtly between them. "That sounded remarkably like a threat, Mr. Winters." "I advise against making any more of those in my town." Robert's gaze darted between Eleanor and Foster, reading the situation with growing comprehension. "I see," he said softly. "You found yourself a protector. How convenient." "I've found myself," Eleanor corrected him. "Something I could never do in your shadow." A crowd had gathered now, watching the confrontation with undisguised interest. Robert, ever conscious of appearances, straightened his coat and forced a laugh. "Very well. We'll do this the legal way, but make no mistake, Eleanor, you are my wife." "That won't change because you've charmed some frontier lawman." "Perhaps not," Eleanor agreed, "but I've changed. I won't be coming back to Philadelphia, Robert, not now, not ever." For a moment, genuine confusion crossed his face as if he truly couldn't comprehend her refusal to return to what he saw as a privileged life. "You choose this," he gestured dismissively at the town around them, "over everything I can provide," without hesitation, Eleanor confirmed. Robert's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll see. Judge, I'll call on you tomorrow to file my petition." With a final glare at Foster, he collected his luggage and stalked toward the hotel. As he departed, Eleanor felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The confrontation she dreaded for months had come and gone, and she remained standing unbruised, unbroken, surrounded by people who believed in her worth. "You did it," Foster said quietly, pride evident in his voice. "We did it," she corrected, taking his hand openly now. And this is just the beginning of the fight. The legal battle that followed tested Eleanor's resolve. Robert, true to his word, filed his petition claiming his rights as her husband. He took a room at Georgetown's finest hotel, presenting himself to the town as a concerned, wealthy Easterner whose mentally fragile wife had fled in a state of confusion. Some townspeople were swayed by his charm and evident prosperity. But the core of friends who had witnessed Eleanor's growth and healing stood firm in their support. Foster, unable to officially involve himself in the case due to his position as sheriff, nevertheless worked tirelessly behind the scenes, helping Eleanor gather affidavits from Dr. Peterson about her injuries when she'd arrived, and from Mrs. Jenkins about her emotional state. The turning point came 6 weeks into Robert's stay, when a letter arrived from Philadelphia addressed to Judge Hammond. It was from Robert's household cook, detailing years of witnessing Eleanor's abuse and offering her testimony should it be needed. "How did this come to us?" Eleanor asked, stunned by this unexpected support from her former home. Foster smiled mysteriously. "I may have written to a few people in Philadelphia. The telegraph office there is run by an old Army friend of my father's. Judge Hammond, having reviewed all evidence, called a final hearing in early February. The town hall was packed as Eleanor, Foster, and Robert gathered for the decision. "I've considered this matter carefully," the judge began. "While the laws of marriage are clear, there are also provisions for the protection of individuals from harm. Mrs. Winters has provided substantial evidence of mistreatment, which Mr. Winters has failed to convincingly refute." Robert began to protest, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "My ruling is this. The petition for Mrs. Winters' return to Philadelphia is denied. Furthermore, I am granting her legal separation under Colorado territorial law with the right to maintain her own property and earnings." Eleanor gasped softly. It wasn't divorce that would have been nearly impossible to obtain, but it was freedom. "This is absurd," Robert snapped, rising from his seat. "I'll appeal to a higher court." "That is your right," the judge agreed calmly. "In the meantime, my order stands. And Mr. Winters, I suggest you return to Philadelphia. Your business must surely require your attention after this extended absence." Defeated legally but still seething, Robert confronted Eleanor outside the town hall. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You've humiliated me, turned this backwater town against me. I won't forget that." Foster appeared at Eleanor's side. "Mr. Winters, your stage leaves in an hour. I suggest you be on it." For a tense moment, the two men measured each other. Then Robert stepped back, his gaze shifting to Eleanor. "You've made your choice," he said coldly. "Live with it." With those final words, he turned and walked away, his rigid posture betraying his fury. Eleanor watched him go, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her: relief, vindication, and finally, a profound sense of closure. "Do you think he'll appeal?" she asked Foster quietly. "He might try, but appeals take time and money, and from what I gather, his business has suffered during his absence." Foster's hand found hers. "Besides, Judge Hammond's ruling is sound. It would likely be upheld." As winter gave way to spring, Georgetown bloomed with new life. Robert returned to Philadelphia, his threatened appeal never materializing. Perhaps his business truly had suffered, or perhaps he had finally accepted that Eleanor was lost to him. With her legal separation secured, Eleanor flourished. Mr. Merkel, increasingly frail, offered to sell her the store on generous terms. "No one else I'd trust with it," he declared. "You've got a head for business and a heart for people, rare combination." On a perfect day in May, with the aspen trees leafing out in tender green, Foster took Eleanor riding into the mountains above town. They stopped at a meadow carpeted with wildflowers, the views of snow-capped peaks stretching endlessly before them. "I love this land," Foster said, helping her down from her horse. "The openness of it, the possibilities." "It's beautiful," Eleanor agreed, breathing in the clean mountain air, "so different from the city." Foster took her hands in his expression uncharacteristically nervous. "Eleanor, I know legally you're still bound to Robert. I understand that full divorce may never be possible given the laws as they stand." Eleanor nodded, a familiar sadness touching her at this reality. "But I don't care about legal documents," Foster continued. "I care about you, your strength, your kindness, your courage. In my heart, there's only one truth that matters. I love you, and I want to spend my life with you." He dropped to one knee in the flower-strewn grass, still holding her hands. "I can't offer you a conventional marriage, but I can offer you partnership, respect, and unwavering love. Will you build a life with me, Eleanor? Here in this place where you arrived wounded but found your true self?" Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as she looked down at this man who had shown her what love really meant: not possession or control, but support and acceptance. "Yes," she whispered, drawing him to his feet. "Yes, Foster McAllister, legal or not, you are the only husband my heart will ever recognize." Their wedding was unconventional by necessity. Though they couldn't legally marry while Eleanor remained tied to Robert, they held a commitment ceremony at Foster's cabin, with Judge Hammond presiding and their closest friends witnessing their vows to each other. Eleanor wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from Denver, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Foster stood tall in a new suit, his eyes never leaving her face as they pledged their lives to each other. "The law may not recognize this union," Judge Hammond told the gathered friends, "but we who know these two recognize the truth of their commitment. In the ways that truly matter, they are bound to each other by choice, by respect, and by love." They settled into Foster's cabin, expanding it room by room as their family grew. Their first child, a son they named James, arrived a year after their commitment ceremony. A daughter, Sarah, followed 2 years later. Though the children legally bore Eleanor's surname of Zimmer, everyone in Georgetown knew them as the McAllister children. Eleanor's dry goods store thrived under her management, expanding to include a small bookshop section that became a gathering place for the town's intellectually minded citizens. Foster continued as sheriff, respected throughout the territory for his fairness and courage. 5 years after Eleanor arrived in Georgetown with a blackened eye and shattered confidence, news came from Philadelphia. Robert Winters had died suddenly of heart failure. The lawyer's letter included divorce papers Robert had apparently signed shortly before his death, but never filed his final acknowledgement that Eleanor was lost to him. "Free," Eleanor whispered, touching the papers with trembling fingers. Truly free. Within the month, Eleanor and Foster were legally married in the Georgetown church, their children serving as ring bearer and flower girl. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, the entire town turning out to honor the couple whose love story had become local legend. As they danced under lantern light, Foster pulled Eleanor close. "Remember the first time I saw you?" he murmured against her hair. "How could I forget? I was terrified, trying to hide my face. You looked up at me with such defiance, even through your fear. That's when I knew you were extraordinary." Eleanor smiled at the memory. "And you said, 'No one will touch you again,'" Foster finished. "It's still true, you know, as long as I live." "I know," Eleanor said softly, "but the difference is now I believe it. And more importantly, I know I can protect myself too." Foster spun her gently under the stars, her laughter joining the music that floated through the mountain air. From wounded stranger to beloved wife, mother, and businesswoman, Eleanor had transformed herself in the embracing arms of Georgetown, Colorado, finding not just safety but true belonging in this wild, beautiful land. As the music slowed, Foster kissed her tenderly. "Welcome home, Eleanor McAllister," he whispered, "for good and always." "Home," she agreed, the word holding all the promise and security she had once thought forever lost. "For good and always."